Hi guys, and welcome back to True Crime with Bongi. My name is Bongi, and if you're new here, a very warm welcome to you. Thank you so very much for stopping by. I hope that you will decide to stay and join us every Wednesday as we talk about true crime cases from literally all over. Today we're going to be talking about the case of the beautiful young Palesa Madiba, who went missing in August of 2013, only for her body to be found 2 years later at her very close friend's home. It was a very heartbreaking story. It still is, and what makes it really heartbreaking is the fact that it took the police so long to finally crack the case. It took 8 years, if not more than 8 years, for them to finally convict the killer. If you want to hear all about Palesa Madiba and her story and her case, please stay tuned. But before I get into it, as per usual, I'm gonna make my usual disclaimer that I forgot to make in my last video that I mean absolutely no disrespect to anybody that I'm going to be talking about and all the families that were and are affected by this case. This video is purely for educational purposes, and all the information was gotten off the internet and simply compiled into one video. And with that being said, we're just going to get right into it. Palesa Madiba was born on the 7th of November 1992 in Deep Kloof, Soweto, to mother Khosi Khalisitwe and father Samuel Madiba. She was one of 9 children. She had 6 sisters and 2 brothers, and obviously she was one of the 7 girls. When she was still quite young, the family moved to Free State, where Palesa attended school at Boshoff Primary School and would later attend Boshoff War School. Palesa's father passed on in 2006, and even though this was a very difficult time for the family at large, it was especially difficult for Palesa because she was a daddy's girl. She was really close to her father and found inspiration and motivation in everything that her father did. So his passing really affected her a lot. She was described by her family as a soft, loving, and passionate girl who was also extremely respectful. After Palesa matriculated in 2010, she moved back to Deep Kloof, Soweto to live with her grandmother while attending or studying at the University of Johannesburg. She was pursuing a Bachelor of Commerce degree, majoring in accounting. She did really well in school, and she was also working on the side. She worked at Student Village whilst doing her first and second year, and she also did some promotional work for Hansa just for some extra cash. Palesa had a close / tight friend group who always made time for one another, and among this friend group was a girl called Matshidiso Mkhwanazi, who also, like Palesa, lived in Phiri, Deep Kloof, Soweto. On Friday, the 9th of August 2013, which was the National Women's Day, Palesa made plans to attend a party at Matshidiso's home, hosted by Matshidiso's family. She first started the day by going out for breakfast with his cousin brother Thabiso and other female family members, courtesy of Thabiso, just in celebration of the females in his family. Later that day, Palesa asked Thabiso to attend the party with, but Thabiso declined the invitation. He did, however, insist on taking Palesa to the party, but Palesa declined as well and said that she'd just take a cab to and from. That would unfortunately be the last time that Thabiso would ever see his cousin / sister again. Palesa didn't go back home that night, so the following day her sister Tebogo Madiba tried reaching her. Tebogo called Palesa's phone, but all her calls went unanswered. However, at this point they weren't really thinking much of it. They weren't worried. They thought that Palesa probably had a valid explanation for not answering their calls, even though this was very unlike her. They tried to reach her again the following day, but this time her phone was off. Still, the family didn't think much of it. They didn't read too much into it. They thought that maybe Palesa decided to spend the weekend at her friend's place and she would explain everything to them when she got back home on Monday. But on Monday, the 12th of August, there was still no word from Palesa. That Monday at around 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., Tebogo received a phone call from Matshidiso, who explained that she had been trying to get a hold of Palesa the entire morning to check if she had made it it to school on time, made it to class, but she couldn't reach her. She also asked Tebogo if she had at all spoken to Palesa that day. Up until this point, the family was convinced that Palesa was okay wherever she was. Well, they thought that she was at Matshidiso's home. But almost immediately after hearing the news from Matshidiso, panic set in and they sought answers from the very last place Palesa went to. So Palesa's family asked the Mkhwanazi family for an explanation. That's when they were told that Matshidiso left for work that morning at around 5 a.m., leaving Palesa behind. Palesa's classes were set to start at around 10 a.m., so the rest of the family left her behind when they also left for work. This explanation was not at all satisfactory for Palesa's family, so they headed over to the police station to report Palesa missing. The police did not treat this matter with urgency at all. When they first got there, the police were extremely dismissive and they didn't prioritize their case at all. They were told that the officer in charge was not around, so they couldn't open a missing persons docket, but they did take the family's statements. The family also had to ask the police to head over to Matshidiso's home to ask some people some questions because Matshidiso didn't actually live alone. She lived with her grandmother, uncle, and there were some tenants in the yard. So they believed that somebody must have seen or heard something from Palesa. The police actually didn't want to go there. They were refusing, but the family were insisting that they had to go there, and eventually the reluctant police officers finally decided that they'd head over there to see what's up. 2 police officers then went with the family to the Mkhwanazi home. The police were told that Matshidiso's uncle Dumisani Mkhwanazi was actually the last person to be seen with Palesa or to see Palesa. From the surface, Dumisani appeared to be a young, clean and decent man, but he was actually quite dark. He had 5 children with 5 different women, which is not really a big deal, but Dumisani was quite feared in the community. Community members described him as a gangster, and he was actually popularly known in the community as Matri, because apparently he carried around 3 firearms with him. So Matri told the police that he had seen Palesa and spoken to her just before she left. She was locking the door to the main house, and when he heard her leave, he approached her and told her to leave the key behind because he was still in the yard. Palesa then gave him the keys and then left for school, leaving him behind. What made him suspicious to Palesa's family was the fact that he kept on interrupting Matshidiso. The police would ask Matshidiso something and then Dumisani would just answer it instead of just giving Matshidiso a chance to speak for herself. And he would also just answer questions that had absolutely nothing to do with Palesa or Palesa's disappearance, just random stuff. He was definitely suspicious. I would have been suspicious too, but the police didn't find anything suspicious about Dumisani, so they just left. The media quickly got a hold of the story and they were talking more about Palesa and Palesa's disappearance than the police were. But thankfully they got to draw more attention to the Palesa Madiba disappearance, to her case, and obviously this applied more pressure to the police. The police then started to take the case more seriously. They first managed to trace Palesa's cell phone and they traced it from Piri to Johannesburg CBD, where they found the phone at a pawn shop. The owner of the shop unfortunately could not give the police a clear description of the person who had sold the phone to him, so that was kind of a dead end. Other leads were also getting called, so the police then started searching the Mkhwanazi property. They went there multiple times and even brought in sniffer dogs to try and assist in the search, but the sniffer dogs detected nothing. After multiple searches at the home, the Mkhwanazi family applied for a court interdict restricting the police from entering their yard, and obviously that just made things slower. They actually applied for the court interdict because they felt like the police were harassing them and were also giving them a bad reputation within the community. This all happened within a period of 2 weeks, and pretty quickly all the leads had went cold. This only increased the family's devastation. The missing persons case was later closed by the police, who believed that they had done all they could, left no stone unturned, and that there was simply no evidence. But the family did not lose hope. They still believed that Palisa was out there, and they still very much believed that they could find her, and so they didn't want to stop looking at all. About 2 months after Palisa's disappearance, the family held a rally, which also brought more attention to the case yet again. They received many calls from various people claiming that they had seen Palisa at certain places, and the family, and by the family I mean Tabiso, would follow all the leads. He would literally drop everything and head to the different various locations where people claimed to had seen Palisa, but all of them were hoaxes. A few months later, Captain Amos Maneta of the SAPS was tasked with this case to try and find clues to solve the case. He also struggled to find any leads, but unlike the previous team, he had patience and humility. He constantly communicated with the family, which was a first because they always had to communicate with the police. The police weren't communicating anything with them, and he just by doing this, he gave them hope. They finally saw that somebody cared about this case just as much as they did, and so, you know, he just essentially kept their hopes alive. More than 2 years later, though, the police finally made a breakthrough, or had a breakthrough. Captain Maneta received a phone call from an anonymous caller who told the captain to head over to the last place where Palisa was seen alive. He told the captain to head to the back room, which was Dumisani Mkwanazi's room, and that under the wash line he would spot a square patch of soil that had sunk into the ground. He further told the captain that that's where they would find the body of 21-year-old Palesa Madiba. So on the 16th of December 2015, Captain Maneta and his team headed over to the Mkwanazi property, and they followed every direction that they were given by this anonymous caller, and indeed some skeletal remains were found right there on the patch of soil that had sunk into the ground. There was actually a pavement that had been made on top of that shallow grave, but the police successfully exhumed the skeletal remains. The remains were then taken to the morgue, and DNA tests were conducted, which only confirmed what the police already knew, that that was indeed the body of 21-year-old Palesa Madiba. There's a footage of Palisa's mother just collapsing at the gate to the Mkwanazi property on the day that the skeletal remains were exhumed. I think that at the time, even though it wasn't confirmed yet that that was Palisa's body, I just think that this lady just knew instantly that that was her daughter's body. And I think what hurt even more was that this entire time she was right there. She had been right there for over 2 years and nobody said anything. Also, the family up till this point, they still had hope that Palisa was still alive. They still had hope that we would find her one day and she's gonna come in here, she's gonna tell us everything that happened. She's fine wherever she is. But that little bit of hope that they had was taken from them just like that. So the skeleton was found completely intact, which gave the police the impression that her body had been there the entire time. Forensics later confirmed that the likelihood of the body having been moved was slim to none. The police then discovered that there had been some renovations done at the Mkwanazi home very shortly after Palisa had disappeared. Dumisani's doorknobs were broke, and you know, he changed the locks and everything, and also they installed or made a pavement at the home. Obviously the pavement explains why the dogs could not detect anything, but my question is, why didn't Matidiso or her grandmother find it suspicious that Dumisani was suddenly paving the yard very shortly after Palisa went missing? Why did they not question anything, and why did they not mention that to the police? You know, they could have at least mentioned it to the police. He also actually did the pavement himself, which goes to show that he definitely had something to hide. The pavement was apparently very uneven, and his neighbor actually asked him why he would pay somebody to do such a sloppy job, and that's when Dumisani told him that he did it himself. I mean, everything is just questionable. I would have questioned it if like somebody went missing at my home. The last place they were seen is my home, and now suddenly my uncle, who happens to be the last person to be seen with my missing friend, suddenly installs a pavement. I mean, come on. So police were now looking for Dumisani, but he was nowhere to be found. They did, however, take in Matidiso and her grandmother in for some questioning. They were questioned and questioned and questioned, but nothing was suspicious about them, so they were allowed back into the public. Nobody would be arrested for a very long time, actually, but the police were still making some progress with the case and still getting some leads. One day, somebody from within Dumisani's circle called the police and just came clean about something that Dumisani had said to him. Up to this point, the police didn't have enough evidence to arrest Dumisani, but he was still missing though. So this caller told the police that on one day in 2015 they had all went out for some drinks with some friends, and at some point during the night, one of the ladies that they had gone to the party with, or to whatever location they were at, got tired and told them that she was gonna go take a nap in the car. So Dumisani, who was furious for some unknown reason, said in Zulu, "Tell this woman that there's no way she's gonna go and sleep in the car. I'll crush her like I did to Palesa Madiba." So this statement obviously shook everybody, but I think, like I said, Dumisani was already very feared in the community and nobody wanted to step on his toes or be the snitch at the time. But this statement, the "I'll crush her" part, actually correlated with the forensic results. The results showed that Palisa's skull was cracked like it had been crushed. There were also a number of blunt force trauma injuries found on the skeleton. There were trauma signs on the ribs and along the spine, which is consistent with trauma being applied to the front and back simultaneously, which is also consistent with somebody being crushed against the wall, the floor, or between two objects. So the police then took the forensic report and the statement made by this friend to the office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, and the decision was made that there was indeed a case. Captain Maneta then applied for a warrant of arrest. His office was broken into multiple times after this warrant of arrest was issued, and it seemed like somebody was looking for Palesa Madiba's docket. His life and safety were also threatened for quite a long time during the search for Dumisani Mkhwanazi. It also seemed like Dumisani was always a step ahead of the police, like somebody within the police force was informing him of everything that the police were doing. So if the police had found out that, oh, Dumisani is at this corner, go arrest him now, somebody would warn him, okay, maponesa ata, please leave, you know. And yeah, the police are no fools. They knew that somebody from within the police force was giving Dumisani information, and so it was gonna be difficult for them to catch him. It would actually take them years to finally track down and arrest Dumisani Mkhwanazi, but eventually he would be arrested. He was arrested in Protea, Soweto, after going to a court hearing in relation to possession of an unlicensed firearm. So he was arrested for possession of an unlicensed firearm, and that's when Captain Maneta took the opportunity to also arrest him for the murder of Palesa Madiba. Dumisani was adamant the entire time that he was innocent, and he maintained his innocence throughout, like till the very end. But this is Matri we're talking about. He was definitely not trying to portray himself as an innocent angel, so his behavior was kind of telling. He would verbally attack the media most of the time, and he just acted like somebody, a very guilty person, a person with no conscience, a person who did not feel any remorse whatsoever. He was just there. He also provided no explanation on his end, no explanation as to what happened to Palisa on that day, or even an explanation just trying to remove the guilt from him. I don't know, he just didn't give an explanation. He pleaded not guilty but didn't explain anything on his part. Dumisani, like I said, was known in his community. He was very notorious and he was feared. It actually came out that he had shot and killed somebody at a tavern in broad daylight, among other people, but for some reason, somehow, he was acquitted. So I think him managing to get away with that murder sort of gave him this attitude that he was above the law, that there was no consequence, because if he managed to get away with that crime that had so many witnesses, I mean, what was the Palesa Madiba case? What about it? I mean, he had no witnesses whatsoever, so he believed that he was just going to get away with it and he was going to go back to terrorizing the community of Piri. But this time around, people actually came forth and they testified against Dumisani. People were finally letting go of their fear. They had finally gathered up enough courage to speak up against this guy. Dumisani, like I said, was very cocky and arrogant throughout the entire trial, and the judge also described him as somebody who displayed a catch me if you can attitude. Like I said earlier, he clearly did not think that he was gonna pay for this one. He thought he was above the law and was gonna get away with it, like he had gotten away with many of his other crimes. Dumisani Mkhwanazi was found guilty of murder on the 4th of December 2020 and he was sentenced to 31 years in prison on the 26th of February 2021. I wish I could sit here and tell you guys that he got a life sentence, but unfortunately 31 years is all that he got, and I don't know how true this is, but I think we've all heard that 31 years in prison is like 15 years. It's like you only get to serve half of your sentence. I don't know the truth of that, but we've all heard the stories. Again, we've all heard the stories. So after almost 8 years, the killer was finally convicted. Her remains, also I forgot to mention this, but her remains were taken to her family on the 24th of January 2016 and she was given a peaceful and very respectful send-off. So yeah, that brings us to the end of this week. Next week there's actually not going to be a video because I'm going to be preparing for Serial Killer September that I announced last week. I'm actually really excited for Serial Killer September. If you are, comment down below, let me know that you are. Looking forward to it. We will get to see each other though on the first week of September on Wednesday or Friday, depending on how much time I had to edit the videos. I think the videos are going to be really long actually, but I don't know. I'm not quite sure yet because I don't have the information yet. But anyway, I hope Serial Killer September will be a success. Comment down below what you thought about this case or any additional information that you may have, and also don't forget to like this video if you found it informative or enjoyable, and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And with that being said, again, my camera is doing this yet again. It's doing this yet again. With that being said, I'll see you guys in my next one. Stay safe, stay beautiful, stay amazing. Bye.